In today's episode, we speak to financial therapist Wendy Wright, who blends psychology and money to help people transform their relationship with finances. If you need a judgment-free conversation and way to approach navigating spending, saving, and financial blocks, this episode is for you.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money flow.
Hey babe, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about something that we mention often, which is how money is emotional and how we really have an emotional connection to, whether it's positive or negative, to our money. And we talk about this a lot. So we figured it was time to bring in somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. And so we are talking to a financial therapist today, which I think is so exciting because we're going to dig into our emotions and our mindset around money with somebody who does this for a living. Wendy, welcome to the Sugar Daddy Podcast. We are so happy to have you.
Hi, I am very excited to be here, and I think that it's just really fantastic the work you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. Well, we want to make sure that our listeners know exactly who we're speaking to. So we're going to get into your bio, and then, of course, we're going to get into your first money memory, because that is how we like to start our guest conversations. Wendy Wright is a financial therapist who blends psychology and money to help people transform their relationship with finances. With a background in therapy, coaching, real estate, and business, she brings a unique, judgment-free approach to navigating spending, saving, and financial blocks. Based in Denver and working virtually worldwide, Wendy supports individuals, couples, entrepreneurs, and working professionals. Her insights have been featured in outlets like CNBC, QuickBooks, and various podcasts like the Stacking Benjamins podcast. Welcome to the Sugar Daddy Podcast. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so glad. All right, let's get into your first money memory. We always love to know our guests' kind of origin stories and their first thoughts and feelings and memories around money. So we'd love to hear yours today.
Yeah. Okay. So when I think about this, usually the first one that pops up for me is when I bought my first toy. And I don't know if anybody remembers this one, but it was a Chrissy doll who had this button on her belly button, and you push it and her hair would grow, and then you push it again and the hair would come back in.
Yeah.
You're nodding, Jessica. Have you seen this before?
So I remember vividly wanting one and not getting one. So I remember.
Yes. Well, I think she had a pretty big impact on me too, because the one I got was redheaded. And later on in life, I went through probably like 2 decades where I was coloring my hair red. So I can only say that was an origin story for my red hair days as well.
I love it. So important question. Did you cut her hair when you pressed the belly button and it went long? Okay. Because I think I would have cut the hair.
Yeah.
Probably.
No, I am not. I didn't cut any of my doll's hair. I was like, I don't even cut my own. I just have this thing where I'm scared to cut my hair. I don't cut my hair. I'm like, no, it'll mess it up. So yeah.
Well, I didn't cut my own hair, but definitely all my Barbies, all of my baby dolls, they had terrible bangs, terrible haircuts. Absolutely, it was a thing.
Yeah, like the bangs that are up to here kind of thing. Yeah, yes.
Exactly. So did you buy the Chrissy doll with your own money, or was it a gift, or what was the story there?
I remember in my memory, I bought it with my own money. I'm guessing that was like Christmas birthday money, because I was like 10-ish, like young enough not to have a job yet. And so that was another thing I remember about thinking it was really special because I had bought it myself. I'm sure then I was a little more bossy with my little brother that he probably wasn't allowed to touch it. I can only imagine. Yep.
It becomes more precious when you spend your own money.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how did we get from the Chrissy doll, and then you have kind of real estate? I know you've done some house flipping, and I mean, you've had quite the background. What led you into financial therapy? I mean, that's a very new and niche space.
It is. It's still relatively new. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to explain to your audience what it is. That is still often when I speak, or when I'm meeting with potential new clients, usually when I speak, only maybe 1% of the people have even heard the phrase before, so it's still really new. For me, it seemed like when I got to it, it was just this big aha of, okay, this was all my history. Like, in one of my, I think it's on my About page, but often I have said, I feel like my life is like a quilt, like you're just putting all the squares in and you don't really know the design until you look at it. So when I found financial therapy, I've been a therapist for 25 years, and this was about 10 years ago. I was working, this is a long story short, but because there's a lot to this. I was working in high-level eating disorder care. I'm also an eating disorder specialist and intuitive eating counselor, and in my background. But because of my business background, because I was in mortgage banking and I flipped houses, and even a therapy practice is a business. I've been in private practice before, and as my clients would either demonstrate some money behaviors, such as these were patients at high-level eating disorder care, so everything got delivered to the front desk, and there would be like 100 boxes a day coming in there. And to me, I was like, that's interesting and curious, and I began talking to patients about it, and found they were often, because they couldn't use the eating disorder behaviors, they were shifting often into some kind of money behavior. For instance, maybe shopping was, I'd say, show me what you bought, and we'd pull it up on the screen, and they'd say, this is what I got, and it was so cool because they were using the same exact words. Like if they were using an eating disorder behavior, such as restriction or binging, it would be, so I don't get fat, so I can be accepted, so I can, be normal, whatever. Then they were buying this t-shirt. Like, well, I wanted to get that shirt because then I would feel like I fit in, I'm accepted, I feel normal, I feel like I would be thin, all of those kind of things. And I was like, this is really interesting. So then I began literally to Google, has anyone else noticed the connection between money and emotions? And as you may or may not have heard at this point, there's research done now, so that's helpful. But research will tell you 80 to 90% of our financial decision making is emotionally driven. Yes.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so started to put all that together, and then went back into private practice at the time, and exclusively now I focus on financial therapy. I also got money coaching training, so I have this really unique blend of the therapeutic approach and coaching tools, and then we look at it from the therapy lens and do all these kind of things with it, so it helps to really create some change, but not just change, but change that's sustainable. That's so important to me. Like, we can all do something for about 21 days, right? But then what about a year later? What about 3 months later? So we want it to be sustainable.
For the audience, to kind of help them have a better understanding of what financial therapy is, can you kind of explain a little bit more of what it is and what it's not?
Yes. It's just a great question too, because as I have even trained therapists to do financial therapy, that was a big part too. Like, where do you draw the line? Financial therapy, and even because I'm also trained in coaching, so there's even there's therapy, there's coaching, there's advising and planning. There's also financial counselors, which often is very different than financial therapy. So it's a great thing to be able to distinguish there. So I'm a licensed therapist and marriage and family therapist, which is why it's going to be great for us to also talk about couples. But in the financial therapy, the way I describe it, every session we talk about money. In other therapies, which we'll call them, other traditional therapies, you may or may not talk about money. And a lot of my clients will come to me. Sometimes therapists will send their clients to me to do the money work, because they recognize every time we kind of got close to money, my therapist was like, I don't really feel comfortable talking about that. And we wouldn't talk about it. And so there is you want to have a certain level of comfort talking about money. And also as with any money work at all, no matter what you're in, it's really important to do your own money work first and kind of know your story and stuff. But so financial therapy is going to be more about looking at what's your story. And I always say we look back at the story for context, not to hang blame. We don't want to get stuck there, but we want to see, oh, okay, that makes sense, why this is coming up for you or why you're doing this. We want to look at the feelings. And so one of the things I will often do is have people pause, and maybe we're talking about a certain spending decision making, and I'll say, what was your feeling? Now, most people are not used to describing their feelings. So sometimes we'll pull up the feelings wheel, which you can just Google feelings wheel and you'll get a ton of really good options. And they'll look at it and they'll be like, oh, and then they're like naming 4 or 5 different feelings all around whatever the spending decision was. So we look at that. There's healing to do from financial trauma or financial hardships. Maybe there's grief work to do around something that feels like a financial mistake. Because often if we feel like we made a mistake, we can get stuck there, especially if we're perfectionists like me. There is also communication work, mindset work, all of those things that really play a role. And so that is where the therapeutic role comes in.
Okay.
I love that.
And to take it to the next part of that is, what clearly is it not? Because I think that's the hard part for people, is that they start to kind of blur the lines.
Yeah. Well, it's not investment advice. It's not selling any kind of products, like investment products, or recommending, you need this index fund, or you kind of do this. It's not, in many cases, it's not going to include coaching. It's not going to include, why don't you do this or why don't you do that tactically. It is also not get on a quote unquote budget. It's not, you just need to pay off your debt, or it's not anything with the word just in the sentence, because it's way more complex than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good distinction. And I love what you said about doing the work around mindset and trauma and building and showing context. I think that, and we're going to talk about it, but I'm sure that comes in a lot when you're working with couples who have varying backgrounds and experiences with money. Mm-hmm. And building that context can help you understand, well, why is my partner the way they are? Why does it take them so long to make a decision? Why do they spend without pausing? Whatever direction people go, I think that context is really important. So thank you for clarifying that for us.
Yeah, I think it's also very important to clarify, because it also helps you distinguish where you're at in your journey and what you actually need. Because, correct me if I'm wrong as well, I would say that from maybe a sequential order, that a lot of people maybe need to go work it out with a financial therapist prior to working with someone like myself as a financial advisor, if that's what they need. Mm-hmm. I definitely have experienced working, trying to start working with someone, and it's very clear, like, you're not ready yet. Maybe you do need to speak with a financial therapist prior to working with me.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And tell me what you think about this. Like, this is how it turns out. When they come to me, then we talk about what is the role of an advisor, planner kind of person, and then how do you talk to them? And I have actually role played many times that conversation, because a lot of my clients, and you probably have noticed, like maybe their eyes glaze over, or they seem real distracted, or all these sort of things that are telegraphing to you, this is too big, I can't touch it yet, kind of feeling. And then we practice and break it down to where they can have a much more satisfying conversation. So it works hand in hand really nicely.
Yeah, I try to incorporate, aspects of behavioral finance, but obviously I'm not a financial therapist, so I cannot go nearly as deep as you do. But I do try to address that, because, like you said, if it was just simply, it was just simply the numbers, it'd be easy. And that's 1% of what I do, and that's 1% of how people even make decisions. Everything is an emotional attachment.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I came to you, Wendy, as a first-time client, what would our first session be like?
Ooh, great question. The first session is I'm doing a lot of listening and you're going to do a lot of talking. So we really want to go back into essentially tell me your story through the lens of money. And this is something most people have never done, never even thought about doing. So we start looking back to early money memories because they usually tell us something. So when we begin to do that, we may start at maybe the first memories are in elementary school, maybe the first memories are in high school. We go through I'll ask questions like when you got your first paycheck, what did you think and feel? What was the job of that money? What was the function of it? For a lot of people, that first paycheck, the job was the ability to make independent decisions, and which is really, really powerful to see because that's one of my favorite reframes of money is to look at it as a decision-making issue so that we can stop. We can easily get stuck on the word money and think money is the problem, quote unquote. I'm using air quotes. And so that really helps us begin to open that up to see what's really going on.
Yeah. How long do people typically, and I'm sure it varies, but what is if there is an average of how many times would I see you to have my, I don't know, my money breakthrough or really understand why I am the way I am or feel the way I feel about my money?
Yeah, it is. So, of course, the answer is it depends. But based on my experience.
Favorite answer.
Yeah.
I know, really. It depends. We'll see. One of the ways that we begin to look at it is you can have a breakthrough in the first session. Often in the first or second session, telling the story, clients will kind of have some of those lean back moments of like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like now that I'm saying it out loud, it makes perfect sense, kind of thing. So there's a lot of insight gained from looking at the story and talking it through. Typically, it's easily 3 to 6 months of work is a good frame for it because it's not fast work. But I do personally try to blend the sort of like the long-term trajectory with short-term gains or changes so that they feel a momentum because that's really important when you're trying to make a change. One of the biggest things that will start to help it feel better is just the fact that they've started talking about it in a safe, non-judging place. Because seriously, raise your hand, but not if you're driving, of course. But, you guys raise your hand if you've ever experienced a completely non-judging place to talk about money. Most people have not. So that in and of itself can really be a game changer.
Yeah, one of the driving factors behind us starting the podcast was to normalize conversations about money.
Yes.
Without the shame and guilt and fear and stigma and all the things that come with talking about money, and then especially in communities of color, a lot of times it's don't talk about money because it's rude, it's disrespectful, it's private, et cetera, et cetera. So then we miss a lot of the valuable lessons that we wish looking back we would have learned about, saving, spending, value-based spending, better decision making, et cetera. So really important.
So have you seen where maybe you were working with someone on an individual basis and they have a breakthrough and, they start to interact with money in a much more healthy state, but then they get into a relationship and they end up coming back with their partner because I think that's a completely different phase in their life and they maybe have to address different things when it comes to that aspect?
Absolutely. Yes. Because I'll ask you guys, you know a lot of couples, like, have you ever met a couple that had the exact same money story or not even the exact same annual income, so the amount of differences, if you think about it mathematically, you just sort of extrapolate like the different input coming into every decision. And then if most of those decisions aren't talked about, then, a year later or a few years later, they're feeling icky and they're like, I don't know what's going on. We're stuck. And then we open it up in financial therapy and start talking about it. And it really makes a difference.
So I feel like I could think of, from my end, as far as some of the different phases that people go through in their lives, on like how you might be, like you said, in this scenario, you're fine as an individual. Then maybe when it comes to being in a relationship, you need some help. I can even think past that, once you have kids, once, if you were maybe perhaps to become a caretaker for your parents and having to manage their finances, I could think of so many different ebbs and flows through your life where you might need that financial therapy.
Or even planning the wedding, right? Oh, I want a small wedding. You want a big wedding. I mean, those budgets can vary greatly.
Right. And the, oh gosh, we could spend a whole 5 hours talking about the wedding. However, let's kind of boil it down to, it's about decision making, and it's about having an awareness of what are the factors playing into each decision. For instance, we'll just pick on the wedding for a minute. Let's say, you're a month away and you've got all this stuff lined up, and then you find out you're going to have to pay twice as much for the photographer, for instance. And then you're just like, perhaps you're so tired of making decisions, you're not going to make one. But you're making one by not making one. You're like, fine, we'll do it. We just have to get this over with, kind of. Okay, normal. We're not going to judge it, but also we're going to recognize, wow, okay, that played a role. Like decision fatigue played a role. Conflict avoidance plays a role. Like all of these different things. Pleasing parents plays a role. Pleasing the, or like fitting in, pleasing the community, whatever. They all play a role. And weddings tend to sort of be this, like big wave of all of those things come together at once feeling. And then when I'm working with people before and during the wedding, then after the wedding, tends to be a lot of grief work we do because it didn't go the way they hoped. So we try to talk that through before each of those decisions happen. Yeah.
Now, in these sessions, do you dig into the numbers and actually create a plan for maybe how a couple could pay off the wedding? Or maybe the goal is, hey, we don't want to have a wedding with debt. So how can we have the wedding that we want within, this budget? I know you don't like that word. We can get into that. But are you actually like digging into the numbers and helping people solution what they can actually afford?
Yes. Okay. You're bringing up some really good stuff. So let me preface this with a couple of things. So I've put together 10 principles of financial therapy so that just to kind of help people understand what the heck is this stuff. So let's start with the first one, and then I'll jump into another one. But the first one is to approach money with abundant, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. So we start there. That usually is a huge game changer for people, to have that compassion, curiosity, and zero judgment. So as someone's coming together, then also not having that judgment can be really important, because part of judgment isn't always like hardcore, like, oh, that's bad or whatever. Sometimes it's just like a preconceived notion of commonly like, I'm stressed. Okay. That means something different to everybody. So beginning to open that up and like, well, what does that mean if you're stressed? Well, I'm worried about this, or I'm worried about this. So we kind of begin to do that in relationships. Then we want to begin to look at the plan. And I do move away from the word budget because often that word has a history. I haven't met anybody yet that didn't have that word have a history and emotional sort of baggage, so to speak, like that it feels restrictive, it feels perfectionistic, it feels, and often budgets are based on not real numbers. They're based on what we should or shouldn't do. And so if you've heard any, very much about should and shouldn't, that's usually like a clue that there might be some shame, and shame does not help us make decisions. It actually inhibits our decision making. So we want to see that. So yes, then we start looking at the overall plan, because a lot of times what happens before you do this work, before you get this more healed relationship with money and planning, we tend to make our decisions based on the moment. So in other words, let's say a t-shirt, okay? And we all have a quiet, secret price point that a t-shirt should cost. Maybe it's $2, maybe it's $200. But you know, or you're just looking at this saying, okay, well, I'm using my reference point. I'm going to go shop for this t-shirt, and if I think they should all be $10 and they're on sale for $8.99, I'm going to get excited and think I got a deal, right? And then good for me. And if it's $12, I'm going to be like, that is expensive. So, you know, we want to know, where is your price point? What are you starting with? And what are you basing that on? And for a lot of big purchases, there's usually just a lot of guesswork going on, or it's like, well, so-and-so did it, so this must be right. When we begin to work, when I'm working with a couple and we look at the numbers, we bring in the numbers because numbers have an emotional relationship as well. For someone, I'll just say X number of dollars is a lot, whereas for someone else, it's not a lot, right? And so we want to see that. We want to talk about that. We want to know what the numbers are. And so by naming the numbers in session, and sometimes that means we log in to, perhaps we log into the bank account and we look at what's going on, or log into their pay stub, because there's a high percentage of people who do not know how much they get paid. And so
Brandon says that all the time.
It's the truth, right, Brandon? Yeah. Yeah. And so so that's where financial therapy can be really helpful. And the fact that it's virtual is really powerful, because you know, you're on your computer. So I'm like, okay, log in right now. And I'm here to help you, because logging in, looking at the numbers, we don't know what emotions are going to pop up yet. So we look at that. Now,
rage when I see the taxes and the Social Security numbers come out. That comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which, knowing that might come up would help you avoid it, right? Like if you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So, you know, so all of this, so let's come back to the couple and the plan of the wedding. What I want them to see is not just the wedding, not just this month. We want to look out at least 12 months. And for the wedding, I like them to look out 24 months at least, because I want them to see the long-term impact of the price of the wedding without any judgment, because we're just like, hey, you get to make this decision. I'm not telling you what to do or not do, but I want you to see the impact. And what happens with that is they're able to slow the process down a little bit, which is obviously, I've got breathe behind me. That's a big part of my foundational journaling exercise. We start with breath, then we move to intention, and then we move to an action, to movement. So let's say we're doing this with the wedding, like take some breaths. All right, I want to have the perfect wedding. That's an intention. That's not a goal. That's not an action step. And then we move into, okay, what do you want to do? Using kind of the SMART, you know, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time sensitive sort of framework. Okay, then what I will do is I'll decide on a number, and then I'll plug it into my overall plan and see how that feels. Because we don't want to just feel the run up to the wedding. We want to feel the payoff of the debt. Now, on the flip of that, also, if you come to me after it's done, because a lot of people will, I don't want to talk about this till after the wedding, right? It's really important to look at debt, not as a number yet, but as an emotional story. Because people who are stressed about the amount of debt they have are typically stressed about the meaning of the debt, not the number. And so
it makes them they feel like it makes them a bad person. They're morally compromised, like all these heavy, usually not very positive things.
It's associated with every negative feeling, every negative stereotype, every negative viewpoint.
Yes, absolutely. But you can probably attest to this as well. In my experience, paying off debt is very different than staying out of debt. And
Yes.
I want to help you stay out of debt. I don't care about the paying off of it. So we're going to start with how do we get here and how do we shift that core decision making of using debt as a payment method.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that's overlooked is how did you get into debt?
Right.
Because if you don't change that behavior, once you've paid off that debt, you're going to go right back into debt because you didn't address the root cause.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as a former debt cycler, I can attest to it's a miserable experience.
Well, and that's why you hear people will do like the debt consolidation loans and, okay, if I can get this into one lump sum, it'll be more manageable. I'll feel better. And then, yeah, you might pay it off, but you didn't change your habits. You didn't really do the work to understand what got you there in the first place. So this is so powerful, Wendy. I mean, I feel like at this stage, everybody should have a financial therapist before they get married because this is big. You're like, yes.
So one of the things I like that you said was along the lines of you not telling people, this is what you have to do. Because I think a lot of people, when they're working with a therapist or even within financial advising, they think that I'm here to tell them what to do and what not to do. And I'm like, that is not my role. You are the one driving this plan. I'm simply here to help provide some guidance, but ultimately you're the decision maker. And, you might make decision A, but decision A can come with pros and cons, and that might, affect what happens afterwards. But you can still make the decision. I'm not going to tell you not to.
Yeah. But to see the big picture of those decisions.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things. People have a hard time taking a step back and looking past step one because so many things are going on in our life that, outside of just what you're trying to do from a financial standpoint, there's so much other things going on in your life that you don't have a lot of excess attention that you can, use.
Yeah. Attention span is low.
We're inundated with so many things.
We're tired.
And working with someone like, yourself, Wendy, or if you've gotten past that point, work with someone like me, is that we have the ability to take a step back and look at the larger picture. So we could see past step 1, 2, 3, 4 and help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wendy, what do you see when you're working with couples? Like if you had to put a theme around your work with couples, what do you see a lot of?
Well, I would say thematically, we're doing communication work. So that's really a lot of what's going on. Yeah, Brandon's on his head. Yep. Yeah. That's really a lot of what's going on is kind of misinterpreted communication or avoided communication. And so usually when the couple has a certain level of affection for each other, we can make some shifts. If the couple comes and one of them just wants me to tell the other one that they're wrong or, straighten up and behave.
Not a good starting point.
Not a good starting point. And so if that energy's there, I recommend they both do individual work because there's too much there to come together yet. But essentially, I will describe it as we want to decrease reactivity in order to increase connection. And that connection is both to each other, to yourself, and to your financial future. So as we begin to decrease reactivity, and reactivity is not just like getting loud and throwing things, it's also avoidant. Like avoiding is a reaction. Shutting down is a reaction. Leaving the room is a reaction. So as we begin to decrease that, and it will tell you what's really cool about it is couples will come back after 3 to 6 sessions as we begin to work on this, and they will literally, I've heard this many times, I didn't think this was possible, but we went a whole week without a fight. Or, I didn't think this was possible, but we had a conversation about money and it went okay. So it's really cool work.
Yeah. And so powerful because I can only imagine, we talk about money all the time, not only because we have a financial literacy podcast and this is what he does for work, but we just have gotten in such a rhythm where it's just a normal dinner table household conversation. When it's good, bad, ugly, last week we found out his out-of-pocket max is $9,000 for his Achilles. So, we're going to have to plan some things. And
it's like one of those things where I pay attention to normally.
And we didn't.
I didn't necessarily pay attention because I don't actually normally hurt myself.
Yeah, he's a very healthy person.
Well,
but when he goes big, when he, So it was one of those like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we thought, okay, once you hit 5,000, maybe 6,000, and now it's 9,000. Like, come on. And so even just that, you know, we were kind of standing around having lunch and just kind of talking through it, some upcoming expenses, and I have to get a crown. I mean, just, you know, life. And we just talk about it normally, but I know that for a lot of people, those are really heavy, burdensome conversations because there is large amounts of money attached. Like, I don't want to spend $9,000 on his surgery and my crown. Like, I want to go to Bora Bora with that money, you know?
Right. Right.
And so,
yeah.
but I can understand how heavy those topics are, those day-to-day, you know, paying for camp, paying for daycare, getting the car, you know, oh, I need 4 new tires for my SUV. Like, that's hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, you know? I mean, it's the daily life conversations that if you can't have those in a neutral, like, it is what it is, let's come up with a plan kind of a way, I can see how stressful your home environment can be then too, you know?
I mean, I have definitely had, you know, meetings with potential clients, you know, couples, and I can feel the stress through the Zoom call.
Yes.
Where you have them, they are just not on the same page at all. I could think of 2 distinct couples that they are divorced now. I don't necessarily know, you know, all the ins and outs of their relationship and what led to the divorce, but I could tell from sitting on that conversation with them that I'm not surprised that where it ended if you didn't address those issues, because I could see it right there. And it's hard. Like, there's nothing that, especially when it comes to couples, working with couples, if you haven't done the work to be on the same page before you come to me, I'm not going to be able to help you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you are not a therapist.
I am not a therapist.
Yeah. You are not a family counselor.
And it's also like I said, I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained in this. I don't have a background in this. So I don't want to breach that line of where I should stay in my place as your advisor and then start giving you personal advice on your marriage. Like, I think that's not my role.
Right. You probably also don't want it to be your role.
No.
You know, so it's like, how do I speak to financial services providers about how to feel like you can be compassionate and present, but also not have, where's the line, how to not cross that line and when to make that referral. You guys just brought out some really good stuff though, but I want to go back to the first thing that I was really struck with, and I don't think you'll mind me saying this about you, is this whole thing about the out of pocket and not paying attention and not knowing it. It's because you're human. It's fantastic, right? Like, we all do that. So dissolving the judgment around it. But if something like that happens and there's judgment and like, I should have known better, then that's a very different conversation with your spouse, because you are like already feeling defensive, for instance, or shame or stupid. That comes up for a lot of people. They automatically go to, I'm stupid. And so
I should have known better. Why didn't I know this?
I think that's the number one reason, especially for people who are high earners or have advanced degrees. That is the number one reason that prevents them from doing anything. Like, I'm smart, I make a lot of money, I should know this. I'm like,
right.
Last time I checked, med school doesn't teach about finances. So you being a doctor,
not
has
at
nothing
all.
to do.
Yeah. Right.
Well, and I'll kind of add another layer. Neither one of us went into, well, you should have known, or how did you not know that? Because you know what?
Yeah.
We sit down at open enrollment before we make the decision together every year, and the whole family's on my insurance. And listen, you're not going to catch me. So we schedule time, and I'm like, here's the plan, here's all the things, what are we going to need, what's upcoming, who needs braces, whatever it is, and we talk about it. So when we called the insurance to confirm, hey, what is this out of pocket? And she said $9,000. We both looked at each other like, well, we definitely missed that, because we did it together. So there was not even an opportunity for blame. If we're going to blame anything, it's exhaustion in life and how busy we are. And we clearly missed it.
If anything, honestly, I would blame myself because of what I do for a living.
Because you usually are really good about that.
I'm the one that's normally very on top of this. So I was like, But I think it's so easy in a partnership to be like, well, you should have, and you didn't, and you said you were going to. But if you're doing it together and you're at least trying to take accountability together, then when stuff like this happens,
Okay, well, let's problem solve it together because it's not your fault. It's not my fault. Yeah, it stinks. And like, this was not, we're going to be mindful next open enrollment because we're not going to want this again. But there's nothing we can do. And we're not going to place blame. So I think even getting to a place where you can have those decisions and make them together, whether they're right or wrong, then you prevent that next problem, which is that blame that so often is easy to kind of just happen, you know? That's my take.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, you're kind of giving a living, real-time example of what it looks like to have done some of this work. Because it's a lot of times what we talk about in therapy world is like, do the work. And I'm like, what does that mean? So being able to clear out pockets of judgment and shame and moralizing, that happens a lot with money, moralizing like, oh, you know, you're a good person or a bad person. And then also you demonstrated learning, because one of my principles is a plan is only as good as the adjustment process, because things like this always happen. None of us are perfect. So, and for that, it's a great example. Like if you're like, oh, I didn't like how that felt. Next year, let's do it differently. And perhaps that means on a more like tactical sense that I encourage people to have sort of a spreadsheet or a piece of paper where they fill all these things out and look ahead. And you're like, okay, let's be double sure that that's on that, you know, that page or that whatever, like, so that you have not just a way in that moment to say, I want to remember this next May or whenever, but to have also a system in place that is like sustainable, but organized, and creates these helps for your memory, because our memories are not that good. I don't care how old you are.
Terrible.
And so that happens a lot with money. We do a lot of mental math or mental sort of, I'll remember this, and we don't. So we need a system. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who are listening, they're walking their dog or driving right now. What could you say that they can take almost immediately into a conversation with their partner that can make their money conversations incrementally better with very little effort?
Yes, I love that question because I have an answer and it's fun.
Oh, good.
One of my other principles is to, and you'll remember this. It's just a few words. Let's take the money word out of the sentence. So if you say, for instance, we always fight about money, I'll say, okay, take the money word out. Tell me what you're fighting about. Or if it's like, oh, I didn't, you're spending too much. All right, take the word spending out. What is happening too much? What is happening more than you'd like? So that begins to really open it up and get it out of this field of it's just about money, because it's not. At least 80 to 90% of the time, it's not about money. So we want to switch out that word, and that usually brings a lot of insight. Sometimes it's really challenging because I've had clients sit with me for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and they're just like, no, Wendy, it's about the money kind of thing. They're like, no. And then we get to it, and it's about, feeling seen, or feeling respected, or feeling smart, or feeling all kinds of things. Like there's a lot that can come up with that. So that's one easy thing you can do today, is take the money word out of the sentence and see what comes up with, of course, the compassionate curiosity and zero judgment.
Yes. Well, I was going to ask, when you take the money out, what's left? But I love the peeling back of the layers, because it might come down to how that person is feeling, either while they're spending the money or while their partner's spending the money. And maybe I would think too, prioritization, right? Maybe one partner prioritizes spending money on one thing versus another, or habits. I mean, is there a theme behind that you typically see, or something that comes up often when people take the money out of the sentence?
I'd say it's not surprising if what comes up is some sort of belief about themselves and money that is a negative self-belief, such as, well, I was trying to make a smart decision because I feel stupid, or something like that. So often it kind of goes under that. And if you think about if, you know, with your partner, if they share, it's, you know, instead of like, I spent this on this, but they share, I was trying to do this so that people thought I was smart or something like that. Like, then you can connect on that level. You can meet that person there and hold their hand and look at them in the eye and just be like, babe, I'm sorry that you felt that way. That sounds painful.
Yeah.
Versus you shouldn't have done that, right?
Mm-hmm. What would you say to somebody who is listening to this episode and they're like, wow, we need to go see a financial therapist, but they know their partner is not going to be on board? What would you tell them to do?
That's a great question, because I often am working with only one person in the partnership. So when we, and this is probably part of the marriage and family therapy background, I see things as systems. So even if your partner isn't there, we can work deeply on your money story and look at your money beliefs, your money mindset, begin to maybe heal or get more context, more understanding. And then that usually will naturally lead to more satisfying conversations with your partner. But also I have some real specific tips and sort of structure to begin to shift that conversation. And they take those home and they try them, and then we talk about how it went. So it is very effective, even if it's just you.
Oh, that's good. It's like when, you know, all the memes are like, I go to therapy because the people in my life who should be in therapy refuse to go. It's like, right. So now I need therapy to figure out how to deal with the people who refuse to go to therapy.
Right.
You know,
right.
Give me the tools.
Yeah.
You were going to say something?
No.
Okay. I feel like we could talk to you for hours, Wendy. Is there any...
I do have one more thing, one question. Okay. So say somebody...
I saw it brewing.
You know, for maybe a listener out there, and they really haven't maybe thought about financial therapy prior to this conversation.
Or knew it existed.
Right.
But what are some things where you're like, you could say to somebody like, hey, if this is going on, if you're thinking this way, then maybe financial therapy may be beneficial for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. The way I usually say this is, have you ever lost sleep thinking about money? Have you ever cried about money? Have you ever had a fight about money? Have you ever felt frustrated when you go to the car repair store and they tell you need 4 new tires? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel, all these different things? Like, those are all emotions that come up, and financial therapy is a great place to come in and begin to talk about those, so that you can shift from feeling like, I'll say often it feels like the emotions are driving instead of you driving. And so we want to restore your sense of agency here.
That's great. That's great advice.
Well, I think everybody can check that box. That's one of those questions, right? Feeling frustrated, crying, losing sleep. I mean, yes.
And the easy breakdown is that, like, you deal with the emotions. And one of my kind of like lines that I say is that I try to help you take some of the emotions out of the decision-making process.
Yeah, you do say that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you got to get your emotions right.
Yes. We address the emotions so they're in the right place. But then let's look at it from a logical standpoint and try to not make decisions, knee-jerk decisions off of emotions.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you got to unblock some of that stuff first, right? You got to really get to the root.
Yeah, you're never going to be completely separate of emotion, because we all have emotions, and I'll even have some emotion attachments to my money, and I think I'm pretty good at, keeping those in check. So it's also being realistic with yourself. It's not going to be completely absolve yourself from any emotions. Like, that's, unless you're a sociopath or something.
Yeah. Well, you're right. The goal isn't to detach from the emotions. It's to have a different shift your relationship to the emotions, so that you're more like, oh, I see you there. Thanks for showing up. I will feel this. And then after I feel the emotion, maybe whatever it is, then I will make that financial decision. But it's with that compassion and curiosity an openness to it instead of, because often what happens when we judge it, then we get into either a fight or flight or freeze, lots of freeze when it comes to money. And so I think that, Brandon, was where you're able to come in and look at a lot of data without the emotion, whereas someone trying to do that without your support may avoid it for 5 to 10 or 12 years or 20 years. And they're like, I just didn't get to that. But what really, it's not just that they didn't get to it. They're not procrastinators. They just are disconnected from the emotions that are blocking it.
Wow. Well, you are doing really powerful work. This is so interesting.
Thanks.
Is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with? Because I know we talked a lot about the mindset and, you know, money is morally neutral and you're not a bad person if you have debt and just those things that I think really burden people. But is there something you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I think always that level of compassionate curiosity and zero judgment, beginning to make that shift. And that's a challenging shift, but beginning to make it can be really powerful. I also have a quiz on my website that's a great place to start, that, especially for a couple, because if you both take it, then all of a sudden you have, it's the money shadow quiz. So it's kind of like helping you identify what might be getting in the way. And then I have supports that will come into play to begin to work with that. And that's a great place for individuals or couples to start, to begin to get a feel for, maybe have some new words to put to things as well.
I love that.
Yeah, we can leave that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Where can people find you, Wendy, if they want to connect?
Yeah, it is Wendy Wright, financialtherapy.com.
Perfect. We will make sure to link that in the show notes. Thank you for your expertise and your insights on this very, very important topic. And thank you for the work that you're doing, helping people break through, get rid of the shame, really understand their money story so that they can lead better lives, whether they're an individual or in a partnership. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, you bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me and bringing awareness to this dynamic.
Absolutely. It's so important.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go.